Hey everybody, it's Kevin Jones with Life, Mind, and Money. Today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a different stimulus that came from the CARES Act back in March. Now we've alluded to this a little bit, but you have the ability to take money from your own retirement accounts if you're affected by this crisis. Now, just last Friday, there's been expanded guidelines about how people can access this and brings more people in the fold. But there is some caution behind this, so we're going to dive into all of this. As always, Life, Mind, and Money is here to help you through these times, get you the information you need, and help you with personal finance. So if you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button. And don't forget the notification bell below, as it will provide you future videos. And while you're at it, if you wouldn't mind, please smash that like button, as it helps me take on the YouTube algorithm. So I've got sheets in hand, and we're going to dive into how you can take money from your own retirement accounts if you're affected this financially by this crisis, which I know so many of you are, and we've talked about in our previous videos. Now, while we have talked a lot about stimulus help from the various acts that have come out, we're going to be targeting specifically the CARES Act, which was the third installment stimulus that came out. Now, hopefully you've received your $1,200 stimulus check, and I know some of you are still waiting for that money to come, as we've outlined many times in previous videos. But today we're going to be really diving into a specific part of it that we haven't addressed much, which means that you have the ability to withdraw up to $100,000 from a 401k or an individual retirement account under no penalty under the CARES Act to help you under some financial hardship. So how this works is that you have the ability to, under an emergency, now I know a lot of us, we need money. It's because unfortunately we got furloughed or we got laid off. You think about unemployment numbers that are still well into the tens of millions, and people are looking for that unemployment money, and it still hasn't come to their door. So this could be a secondary measure to get money into your hands quickly in order to keep your lifestyle, to keep your family moving along as you figure out how to get yourself to that next job or whatever's next in your life. So how this works is that if you take money out under this clause, they are going to delay how you are paying taxes on it. Now, if you've watched my videos before on retirement accounts, I'd highly advise you to look at it. But under normal circumstances, when you take money out from a retirement account, you fall under two different scenarios, and it depends mostly on how old you are. If you are somebody who is retired and you start taking money out of your accounts, on a typical 401k or IRA, you are going to pay ordinary income on the amount of money that you withdraw, and that depends on what tax bracket you fall into. And then you would pay taxes on it in that tax year. In this scenario, under the CARES Act, you would then pay only taxes on that money if over a 3-year period. So they're giving you a longer period to pay those taxes so you don't have to pay it all up front, which is nice because you can spread it out, and so you don't get hit by the tax man as hard initially. Now, for those who are not retired, specifically people under 59 and a half years old, if you were to take money out of your retirement accounts, that would be almost committing financial suicide because you would be hit with a 10% penalty. Now, under the CARES Act, this doesn't apply anymore. That 10% penalty is fallen off to the wayside, and then you would pay your taxes over the next 3 years on that money that you withdrew up to $100,000. So it really depends on what situation you are in terms of how you'd be affected tax-wise and not having a penalty applied to this situation. Now, another thing to consider is if you are a person that's in a situation where you need this money, whether you're retired or not, if you take that money out and you're actually able to pay it back in time before the 3-year time clock runs out, then you won't have to worry about taxes at all. In most situations, you've got about a 60-day window once you take money out to put it back in to not be affected by taxes. Under the CARES Act, you now have a 3-year window to pay it all back, and then you won't be affected by any taxes in this situation, which is a really nice benefit, especially for those who really need the money. Now, do keep in mind that this nuance to the CARES Act only applies to people that have been affected by this pandemic. So we're talking about people that have been laid off, you've been furloughed, lack of childcare, you're an entrepreneur and your business unfortunately wasn't able to continue forth. Those are all the situations that were under the CARES Act that allowed you to take this money out and apply it accordingly. Now, just recently, there's been an update to this as of Friday. And now there are 2 additional categories of people who can now take money from their retirement accounts under the CARES Act. And those people are people who had a job start date lined up and now have been delayed, or there was a job start that was dedicated that you offered a new job, but unfortunately that's been rescinded, which I can see a lot of us that the businesses were hoping to get started and unfortunately they weren't able to execute on that job offer. Now there's also one additional scenario that's been acted, is that for those who are married, if you had 2 people in the family that were working and that spouse unfortunately lost their job, the other spouse who is maintaining their work has the ability to then take money away from their retirement account in this situation. And the point behind it is to make sure that there's additional income in the household. So that one family member will continue to work and then they can take money from their retirement accounts in order to make up for the difference for the other spouse who unfortunately lost their job. So those are the additional updates provided by the government today on who those can take money from those retirement accounts. Now, let's switch gears here, and there is one additional category for those who are already retired. For many of you, you're supposed to be taking required mandatory distributions from your retirement account starting at the age of 72. Now, many of you took those mandatory distributions in January, and the CARES Act didn't come in place until March 27th. And so it means that typically, if you take those mandatory distributions and you don't pay it back within 60 days, you won't have to pay taxes on it. Now, clearly, this was well beyond that 60-day window. So for those who did take mandatory distributions early on before the pandemic hit, or those who are taking them now during this year, if you are affected by this crisis as a retiree, which means you were unfortunately infected, or you had a spouse that was infected, or you are seeing financial hardship because of the pandemic, you would then qualify under the scenario that those taxes that need to be paid on that income that you distributed can then be spread out over 3 years. But just keep in mind that this only applies to you if you've been affected by the pandemic. If you haven't, under these scenarios, unfortunately that 3-year distribution of taxes just doesn't apply in this situation. So while this is great that you can be able to take this emergency money up to $100,000 from your retirement accounts to help you get by during these times, I do heed caution, and we always do. I've talked about this in other videos about my retirement accounts, and so I highly advise you to look at it so you understand how retirement accounts work. But the most important thing here, especially for those who are not retired and you're still building those retirement accounts for the day that you want to retire on your own terms. And the reason I heed caution is that you only want to do this if it is absolutely necessary. And I can't emphasize that point enough. And the point behind it is that old man compound interest, which is one of those great wonders of the world. And I've got a whole video dedicated to understanding this concept, and I highly advise you to watch it. That if you start taking away from that retirement account now, while you're still growing, you've got years left in your days before retirement. If you start taking away from it compound interest will start working against you instead of working for you. It is amazing how your money can grow because of compound interest, but if you don't have the money there, it will never grow. And so it's a balance between money in the bank, in those accounts, and time on your side. But if you start stripping away that money, compound interest will not be able to explode over 10, 20, 30, 40 years to give you the money that you'll need to live financially independent that we're all trying to achieve and give you that retirement that we all want. So, once again, this is great that this is in the CARES Act and there's been expanded use to get that money in those dire times like we all are facing right now. But if you don't need to touch it, don't. I just really heed caution on that. But if you do, use it and use it wisely and spread those taxes over 3 years so you're not hit so hard initially in the go ahead. And if you can pay it back within those 3 years, I highly advise you to do that. So then you don't have to see any taxes on that money and keep your retirement dreams going forward. I hope you liked this video. If you have, please, once again, smash that like button as I appreciate taking on the YouTube algorithm with me. If you got any comments, please leave them below. I'd love to address them with you. And lastly, if you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button as we're all trying to get through these times and find our way to better prosperity and figure out all our personal finance needs so that we can all achieve financial independence. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.